Hello and welcome to Dialogue. China's new Premier Li Qiang said redoubled efforts were required to achieve China's 2023 GDP growth target of around 5%, while admitting it was not an easy task. He said policymakers will focus on the quality of growth in response to people's need for housing, income, education, and healthcare. Looking ahead, what are the growth prospects of the world's second largest economy? What challenges are there for the new government? To answer these questions and more, I'm glad to be joined by Liu Zhiqin, Senior Fellow with Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China, Victor Gao Zhikai, Chair Professor at Soochow University, and Chen Jiahe, Chief Investment Officer at Novem Arcae Technologies. That's our topic. I'm Xu Qinduo. Welcome to the discussion. Zhiqin, I will start with you. What impressed you the most from the press?
I should say this is the best press conference I have had in the past years. And the first word I had, air freshening. This is a freshening air. That means the freshening air is to give more positive signals and very positive, constructive also the suggestions to the economic recovery and the development. So he is very relaxing and very frank. This is a very important temperament for a leader, especially for new premier. So we see that very high judgment, high praise from the public opinion and also from private companies. So after the conference, I received many calls from my friends, even including friends from Europeans. They said that this premier is so refreshing, has a very, very good and positive and fresh air in this atmosphere, because the tension between China and in some countries is very strong in the past, especially the economic recovery is under pressure from the dynamic pressure from other problems, from geopolitical tensions. But Premier Li made a very great presentation, not only for himself, but also for China.
Mm-hmm. Well received, obviously.
That's
Victor, for you, what are the key messages, the Premier is sending out to domestic and international audience here?
Well, first of all, Premier Li Qiang gave a very impressive performance this morning. Even though he was widely recognized as a leader in China, today's press conference was his first debut in front of the national audience as well as the international audience. He seems very well prepared. He didn't refer to any talking points, for example. He answered all the questions, as far as I can see, in an impromptu manner, very spontaneous. And also, he hit every issue right on its head. And he was very pragmatic, very realistic, and he was very eager to get the jobs done. And also, he positioned himself, the Premier and the State Council, in a right position, because he said that all the major decisions were actually made at the 20th Party Congress in October 2022, and our immediate task is to put the blueprint as laid out by the 20th Party Congress into work plans to get them done. And he seemed very eager to plow right into the job in front of him, roll up the sleeves and get the job done. So I think this was very impressive. Now, he hit a whole range of issues. For example, the farmers' development, the rural development, unemployment issue, the declining birth rate, and then growth of high quality, China's frictions with the United States, for example, and also relations involving Taiwan, the cross-strait relations, and Hong Kong, etc. So all these things that should be the responsibilities of the State Council, he actually touched upon all of them. And I think the spirit of pragmatism and realism, and then his conviction and the confidence in the capabilities and the teamwork of the State Council, new lineup, for example, really gave a lot of trust to the people in China that this government, headed by Premier Li Qiang, will get the job done.
Will get the job done. Jiahe, we see that there's also strong response from the market, for example, in Shanghai and Shenzhen. People see the confidence, people see the capabilities, people see experience from the new premier. What do you make of it?
That's very right when you mentioned experience and the market performance today. I mean, today the market has been performing really good. We have saw the major benchmark indices rose by around 2%, and even some large state-owned companies like China Mobile even rose by 10% today. So you can see how confident the market has been, because you consider that China Mobile is such a large company. It rose by 10%. So it's a lot of money really flowing in, and this comes from many aspects. The first one would be the experience, as you mentioned, that Premier Li definitely had a lot of economic experience with developed provinces like Jiangsu and Zhejiang. So I mean, imagine that every province in China would copy the growth path of Zhejiang and Jiangsu. We will have a wonderful economy with per capita GDP of 30 or 40,000 US dollar. So that's one thing. Another thing is that he mentioned so many things that the market really likes, like developing private economy, trying to have a good relationship with the US, all these things, opening up China's border as much as we can, free economy, all these kind of things. So these are really the points that the market really expect, because these are the points that will bring China's economy into prosperity in the future. So that's why stock market been reacting so good today.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously, the most important thing a lot of people are talking about is the economic growth, Zhiqiang. The government target is around 5%. So we see flexibility there, around 5%. It could be more than 5%, or could be a bit lower, like 4.9, 4.8. Probably that also reflects a certain degree of uncertainty, in particular from the external challenges or global market.
That's true. 5% of GDP growth in this year is a very practice. I mean, that's reasonable and also very rational. As we expected that this year we have some good points that to have a faster development, because we have the right policy rolled out. For instance, not only the speed of the GDP, the number of GDP, but also the quality, high quality development. This is the essential point for this year's economic recovery. But uncertainties and unexpected challenges are still there. We have to see that some countries didn't like or don't like that China will develop smoothly and healthily or sustainably. So this is what they want to have some obstacles and try to have sustain or return the China from its slowing down or decline its development. This is what they are trying to get it. But in China, we should focus on our efforts to strengthen our strong point to fulfill our target. 5% is quite achievable. I think within our domestic demand and also infrastructure constructions, especially the economic restructuring, so we achieve this goal, this point. But we should prepare for some unexpected challenges, especially imposed by some Western countries. For instance, technically decoupling, financial attack, if I say it this way, on China's market, make our capital market unstable, make our more problem challenges. I think that some forces in the West will try to make some obstacles to make the new government facing more pressure. They will not like to see that you will grow as you like. So we can see from the past years. So 5% is reasonable, is achievable, but we should prepare for more challenges.
I think you're referring to, in particular, the U.S. policy toward China, the so-called decoupling efforts or the attacks on the Chinese hard tech sector. Despite that, Victor, you see, if you look at the numbers, for example, market data shows that net overseas capital inflow into shares in Shenzhen and Shanghai Stock Exchange hit a single-month record of 141.29 billion yuan in January, more than the whole of 2022. And also a recent survey by the American Chamber of Commerce in South China showed that 75% of the surveyed companies say they plan to reinvest in China in 2023. So, I mean, at the same time, you do see there's a rising confidence in the Chinese economy.
Well, first of all, I would say the around 5% GDP growth for 2023, as announced by the Chinese government, is first of all prudent, Secondly, it's very conservative. And I think they want to leave enough leeway so that they can deal with whatever uncertainties or unexpected headwinds that may come, either domestically or more likely in the overseas market. However, my personal reading is that this year's GDP growth rate should be no less than 5%. Why? Because I think after 3 years of very rigorous, vigorous enforcement of the dynamic zero COVID policy, and after many people experienced a lot of inconveniences in their daily life, with full understanding that the overall purpose is to minimize deaths and infections among the Chinese people, and the Chinese government really achieved huge success in this regard. And then also lots of economic disruptions over the past 3 years. I think there is pent-up demand for growth in China in all walks of life. And I think many people just want to roll up their sleeves and move forward. And this reminds me of the overall spirit in China in 1978, 1979, when China just started opening up to the outside world. So I think there is a lot of pent-up demand for growth. And I would not be surprised if eventually the growth rate will be higher than 5% or even 5.5 or even 6%. I even said in international media that this year's GDP growth for China may actually surpass that of India, because for quite a few years, India's GDP growth has been ahead of China by quite a few percentage points. So I think this is really a very critical year where China needs to demonstrate once again that China resumes its place as the growth engine for world economic development. So with this kind of a dare-to-do spirit as demonstrated by the Chinese premier, and the fact that his team, the vice premier, the state councillors, for example, are all very well experienced, and then they actually complement each other in terms of their background, their expertise, their skill set, etc. So eventually, I think this collective leadership, this teamwork at the top of the state council will really be not only very reassuring to businesses at home and as well as abroad, but also I think it will convince the international community that China is the right place for you to invest or reinvest. Because if you look around, for example, in Europe, there is a lot of overhang from a multitude of crises, some of which stem from the Ukrainian war.
Right.
In the United States, there is also a very large mixture of all kinds of problems, etc.
And
not easy to resolve.
The recent closure of the two banks.
Absolutely,
crisis.
absolutely. So I think China will again demonstrate that this is the right place for us to get jobs done, for international businesses to come over here to invest and reinvest. And the so-called decoupling is, first of all, very foolish and stupid. Secondly, it will not be welcomed by the international businesses at all. It's against their fundamental interest.
Well, Jiahe, as Victor has said, that there is a pent-up demand for growth, and also you can see the eagerness in the Chinese society to develop, to return to the normal, and then to tap the potential for economic expansion. So we are, let's say, are you expecting probably a strong economic growth, a strong performance for the year?
Definitely. I mean, the market has been really expecting this year China's economy will be pretty well. As Victor just said, the GDP data might be 6% because the government has set the target 5%. There was a lot of guessing before this data came out. People guess whether it's, the most guessing would be somewhere between 5.5% or even 6%. But the government set a much lower target. That has really surprised the market, which shows that the government does not only want the GDP growth rate to be like 6%, which is very high, but it wants more things like environmental protection, order of the market, all these kind of things. So it's not only wanting a very high GDP growth rate, but it has actually been expected by the market that the GDP growth rate might be 6%, as Victor just said, or even higher, 6.1 or 2, because last year we have got a pretty low base because the anti-COVID policy has brought the GDP growth rate to only 3%, but the long-term China's potential GDP growth rate is somewhere between 5 to 6%. So if you have a 3% in the first place, and next year it's very possible you will have 6% or more. So this year, people are really having quite a lot of expectation toward Chinese economic growth.
Well, Jiahe, if you look at, of course, the background for the premier, he's from Zhejiang, Jiangsu, as you mentioned earlier, where private business thrived and are thriving, and also he is also from Shanghai. He deals with this big multinational companies, from around the world to invest in Shanghai. And this gives people a lot of trust and confidence that the premier understands what's going on. He talked about the private sector. He talked about inappropriate remarks previously against the private economy. So tell us the response probably from your friends and colleagues to that.
Yeah, investors are really liking this experience because he has been dealing with one of the most developed economic cities, or perhaps you say the most important economic region in China. Because if you compare the size of economy of Shanghai compared with Shenzhen or Guangzhou, I mean, Shanghai is much larger, got like 25 million people living there. So it's a huge city, and Zhejiang, Jiangsu as well. So in these places, they actually represents best economic development level of China's provinces and cities right now. And the Xi has really got so much experience with these cities. I mean, in these cities, what the government knows that they don't have to do the actual things like investing billions into one project, asking one bank to lend money to another company. They don't do these detailed jobs. What they really do is that they maintain the order of the market, the law, these kind of things, and let the private economy as well as state-owned economies to develop on themselves. And you have a very high growth rate as long as this is conducted. And the market would actually be more efficient with allocating the resources, the capital, everything like this, compared with what the government can do, because the market is composed by everyone. You have so many eyes and ears to know where the opportunities are. So I mean, these are really the best economic development level that China is really having. So if he uses this experience to develop other cities and provinces, you can expect more of the China's economic growth rate.
Well, Zhiqian, I mean, speak of economic growth, one of the important tools is investment. Investment not only from the government, from the state-owned business, but also very importantly from the private sector. Now it seems like the private sector, they get what they need, the full confidence in the economy and in the prospect. So do you expect? I mean, a lot of people are talking about a vitalized, a vigorous private market economic growth this year.
I think this economic recovery will be decided by two sections. One is the state-owned company, the other is mainly by this private side. As we know that in China, in business sections, we have already 170 million that units, the units. They are mainly 80% from the private sections. And as we know, the contribution and also these forces from this private entrepreneur, they are more aggressive, they are more flexible, they are more innovative. That all the innovation made mainly by these private companies. So we see that they are really represents the future of our economic resilience. We see that China in the past 3 years, why China's economic recovery is always a leading position in the world, because of these private sections, because they play performance so well. It's much better than any countries in the world, especially for those that self-claimed so-called free market, like the United States. All these private companies are not so well as in Chinese companies. That's why they give us more image of this development model in China. They give more confidence to the world investors. And I have so many investors from this Germany and Switzerland. They are so confident in China. They said Zhejiang, Jiangsu, and other, including Anhui or Shandong, all these provinces, they said all these private entrepreneurs are so reliable. This is a very important precondition for all these investors to be here. You have the reliable partner because you always honor what you have promised. This is what the advantage we have. So I think in the future, China will be more stronger, more faster, and more transparent to the world economic investors. So this is really a paradise for international, global investors.
Victor, what Zhiqin has mentioned, I guess basically is about this, or you can call it like a easiness of doing business, this business environment. The premier talked about that, talked about equal treatment, basically among private investors, international investors, all the state-owned investors, or from the government. So based on the market standards, based on the legal standards, so everybody's equal. This is a good investment, a good environment for investment.
Absolutely. I think, allow me to remind our audience of a very important fact. That is the region, the Greater Shanghai region, including Shanghai Municipality, Zhejiang Province, and Jiangsu Province, are probably the most developed regions in China, and on the par with, let's say, the Pearl River Delta region. And then in this region, you have very large, very successful state-owned enterprises. But then in the case of Zhejiang, you have very vibrant, very robust private-owned enterprises, families, for example. Tremendous growth momentum. In Jiangsu province, they have a mixture. They have very strong state-owned enterprises, but also family businesses, township villages, village enterprises, and private enterprises of all kinds. And then in Zhejiang province, digital economy is like crazy. Right. Alibaba is headquartered over there, and now Alibaba is really in a controlling position, in a leading position in e-commerce, not only in China, but also throughout the world. So you are talking about traditional businesses, new businesses, and then future businesses. And when you talk about digital economy, if you look at Shanghai, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu province, this will be a platform. This will be a high, very much of a commanding height going forward. Now, for Premier Li Qiang to have personal experiences running all these three very important places, and then don't forget, provinces like Jiangsu and Zhejiang are the equivalent of one of the largest countries in Europe, for example. On a par
in terms of GDP, right?
Yes, on a par with countries like Germany or Italy or France. They are not small entities. So I think Mr. Li Qiang really has brought a lot of experience, personal knowledge, and then he has met with all kinds of enterprises. He has a habit of talking to the CEOs, the chairman, for example, and learn from them, picking their brain, asking them for suggestions, etc. This is well known in Zhejiang province, as well as in Jiangsu province, my home province, as well as in the big kind of international business center in Shanghai. So this bodes very well for the coming 5 years, because the leader knows what he's doing, and the leader knows what the business community really wants, and he cares about the business owners, either state-owned or privately owned or foreign investments in China, for example. And this is exactly what he said. We need to put the blueprints as approved by the Central Committee, by the 20th Party Congress, into work plans, get things done. So I think this is exactly the pragmatism and realism and the dare-to-do spirit that we need for China.
Well, Jiahe, the premier, did talk about opening up. He stressed about that point. He said, an open China and China in the process of constant development welcomes investment from all over the world. China will open itself wider to the world, and we will provide better services to all. You can see this is a very important message, a very clear message to the overseas investors that China embraces all of them for investment and for doing business in China. So that's I would say the message probably will be well received overseas too.
Well, clearly, the Hong Kong market, they tells us it is well received. If you look at what the Hong Kong market has been doing today, it's actually performed even better than mainland stock indices like Shanghai and Shenzhen stock indices. Actually, since last October, the Shanghai market has been rebounded very strongly. I mean, by about 50. Well, the largest rate would be something like 60%, and now it's about 50%. So it's been 50% in less than half year's time. So that the international investors are really really getting the fact that China is welcoming the global investment, and you can really get money here. I mean, just to read the financial statements of companies listing in Hong Kong, that you can see these companies are producing profits rising at a growth rate. Actually, most of the Chinese companies grow at a faster rate than companies you can find in Japan or Europe, basically because China is having a higher economic growth rate compared with Japan and Europe. So companies here are actually growing faster and making more money. And if you compare the valuation of Hong Kong market with Japan or Europe, you can see they're actually trading at a lower valuation. So this looks like a pretty good opportunity for international capital. So you can see all these foreign companies are paying attention to the Chinese market. In recent years, as I work in the investment industry, we have seen much more mutual funds, global investment firms, hedge funds to come and open offices in China. You have so many names that you can't remember, all these names that in the past, many of them are not really familiar with us. They are international companies, and they now open branches in Shanghai and Beijing. So these funds are actually coming in, they're making money out of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Victor, of course, the premier showed that he's deeply in touch with the people and the mass. He talked about most of the people, they don't care about the GDP, the numbers, but what they do care is about the jobs, healthcare, education, right, housing. So that's obviously something our regular folks are expecting to get better, if not this year, at least in the near future.
Absolutely. I think Premier Li Qiang really echoed what has been said again and again by the Chinese President Xi Jinping. That is, the aspirations of the people are the goals of the government and the party. What do the people aspire for? What do they pursue? It's a happy life. It's a higher quality life. And they measure quality of life in terms, as you mentioned, as Premier Li Qiang mentioned in the press conference, housing, healthcare, education, for example, whether they have a bigger car, bigger house, for example. And I think in that sense, the Chinese dream on a personal level is very much like an American dream, We really want to pursue a higher quality of life.
A better life.
Better life. And I think Premier Li Qiang knows this very well. And he emphasizes again and again that you need to get out of the office, go to meet with the people. When you lock yourself in offices, you have all the problems. When you go to talk to the people, you have all the solutions. Right. I think he is absolutely right. People like this.
And also, Zhiqin, I mean, at the end of the day, for any country, what's the goal of the development? Of course, it's for a better life for the people. And the premier is basically talking about that. Ultimately, we are serving the people.
That's true. In early 1980s, I went to Europe. There, I saw so many Chinese migrants. They came from Wenzhou. All the restaurant, shopping center, supermarket, organized, owned by this from Wenzhou people. Even in the very remote area in Austria, in the mountain area, I asked the boss, where are you from? Sorry, from Wenzhou. So at that time, that many people from China that came to Europe, to the United States, in order to learn something. And when they get some money, they send back to make their life better. But at that way that they use their efforts in foreign countries, in the global market. Nowadays that they change their position, the performance, we attract more investors from other countries, from global market. This is a total turning point for this. The people are willing to have a better life, a real good life, high quality, equality, transparent. And security is also very important.
Right, it's the ultimate goal of the people, a better life. With that, we conclude today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests. You can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. I'm Xu Qinduo. Thanks for being with us. See you next time.